everybody, and welcome to AI People. Today we're talking to Eero Laaksonen, who is the CEO at Valohai, which is an MLOps platform. Eero, welcome.
Thanks, Ben, and great pronunciation of my name, actually.
I do my best. I often make big mistakes there, so I'm glad that one came out okay. But so we always open up the podcast by asking you to make a few predictions about the AI industry as a whole. I think AI is a very forward-looking industry, and it's interesting to kind of get the views of people working in that industry. So first question is, how do you see humans and AI collaborating with regard to work in 5 years' time, and then also in 15 years' time?
Oh, great question. Huge topic. I think that if we compare 5 years from now to 15 years from now, I think the big difference is a lot of the creative work, I feel like, is quite easy to help people with AI already today. So things like creating images, creating video, creating scripts, anything that is more creative, even up to programming, is easier because you're not tied into hard facts a lot of the time. What I think will change over, if we go like 5 years from now, I think all creative work will be very heavily supplemented by AI. Then again, if we look 15 years forward, I think we will start seeing better solutions for working with hallucinations, stuff like that, and we'll start to see AI be a day-to-day tool for lawyers, doctors, stuff like that, where mistakes have a much higher stake than in creative work.
Do you see kind of any creative industries becoming like fully automated, like using AI machine learning, or do you still think it'll be like a collaboration with an expert, say, in that field?
Hard to say. I think there's a lot of psychology behind that too. So some areas for sure will be driven just by cost, and I think most likely those will be fully driven by AI. I think a lot of stuff where people would earlier go on Fiverr and pay a few bucks for someone to design a photo or an image, has already turned into that same person going on ChatGPT and just make me a photo. So I think, yeah, we've already gone through a transition where some of that work has been completely automated by AI. And then if we talk higher or more difficult topics, things where we start to be more in the realm of art, I think people will always have some level of appreciation towards the human element of art. And even though on some kind of physical level, I think AI could achieve the same as a human, people will just have the inherent respect towards something that's handmade,
Yeah.
So I think somewhere in there we will still see a lot of appreciation towards human work, but I don't think there are necessarily any huge limitations to what AI can do in terms of creative work going forward. Of course, it's not ready for, let's say, a full feature-length movie, right? We're not there yet, but it seems to go to that direction. Seems like a few years from now, we'll definitely have at least scenes that can be built, complete like pretty long, lengthy scenes with very intricate detail that can be built. And that's, of course, a huge amount of the creative work. Probably like someone like a director will still be in play for a long time, but then maybe we'll have less people on the cameras, less people acting, so on and so on.
Reducing cost, yeah. Okay, and how close do you think we are from AGI? Obviously, Sam Altman made some comments on this recently, which were interesting, but interesting to kind of see where you're at with that.
So I think we have a problem with the AGI definition. My definition of AGI is really this like Terminator level AGI that can truly function in the world on its own. I think we are very far from that. But then if we define it in a simpler fashion, like something that is better than a human at something, I think ChatGPT is already better than every person in something, right? But does it give it some sort of autonomy to function in the world? No, and I think that we still have a lot of fundamental research before we can see something like an actually acting humankind AGI.
Yeah, okay. And looking kind of 20 years into the future, how do you see AI reshaping the global economy? Like, do you see it creating more wealth inequality, or do you think it's going to narrow the gaps in opportunity?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to this. If we talk about generative AI, I think sadly it's gonna be generating a lot of wealth inequality. We're gonna have a lot of jobs automated relatively soon. A lot of that's already happened. We talked about the Fiverr example for creating images, but that goes to so many other examples too. At the same time, we have a lot of opportunity in other sides of AI or machine learning. Things like drug discovery and diagnostics, for instance, in healthcare have been completely overhauled on like how that is being done. Drug discovery, cost of new drug discovery has drastically been reduced after deep learning got involved in the process, and that will of course then impact the price of drugs going forward. And also, like, if we're able to get to a level where a lot of disease can be automatically diagnosed by some kind of AI model, that will have an impact to the world. It'll
economically
it'll drastically reduce the cost of diagnostics globally, and also make it scalable. Like right now, we're not able to offer high quality healthcare everywhere on the planet. When it's automated, we don't need to train all of those doctors anymore to get that same level of treatment across the globe.
Yeah, okay. I mean, maybe like you just answered the next question, because next one was going to be like, what do you see as being the big next jaw drop moment in AI where, you know, something comes along that almost feels a little bit magic and it kind of really cuts through sort of beyond the tech and business world to kind of wider society? Like, do you think that's going to be, you know, massively reduced drug costs or something else?
No, I think that those are going to be like gradual changes. I don't think that there's going to, in life sciences altogether, like there's so much red tape involved that I just don't think that there's ever going to be that one page turn moment where like before this it didn't exist and now it exists. Like we have had with ChatGPT, where like all of a sudden everybody has access to this thing and it changes everyone's workflows. What's going to be the next jaw drop moment? I'm not that sure that there is one. If we look back to generative models, ChatGPT coming out, I think a lot of the improvements have been in the end quite incremental. If we think about the end user, and it's much more on taking these models and putting them into production use case by use case, and then those individual use cases can gain tremendous traction over a very short period of time. But I think that the fundamental technology that has been invented still hasn't been deployed globally, and I'm not sure that if there is a new advancement, like an exponential achievement around the corner. I think it's gonna be much more on like, hey, how do we build the lawyer chatbot?
And all the kind of bringing it into each individual industry.
And finding like where is the big value in each individual industry. And I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think that it's gonna change an average person's life overnight, or be a draw drop moment. I think it's gonna be like incrementally going into different industries and making their changing people's lives in the individual industries.
Yeah, okay. So before we jump into talking about Valohai, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Like particularly interested in your background growing up and kind of what brought you to the AI industry initially.
Yeah, for sure. So my background is very little studies in computer sciences back here in Finland, where I'm based. We started our company, our first company, when I was, I think, 19. We dropped out of uni.
What was that?
University. We dropped out of university and
Sorry, what was the company?
Oh yeah. So the company we founded was a consulting company in e-commerce, very early, like e-commerce products. And it was somewhat successful back here in Finland, but very local. And then we had heard of this magical place called San Francisco, where these startups reside. So we just bought tickets, flew to San Francisco, visited like 2-3 events every day, and my eyes completely opened. I understood that, hey, the teams that are executing here, while good, they're not better than the people I work with back home.
They're just human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the only thing that differentiates us is maybe access to capital, but then more on top of that, the global vision. So we never even had the idea of like, hey, let's build a global e-commerce product platform. It was more of a, hey, let's capture the Finnish market. And after that, I really understood that we have the potential to do something much bigger. Then did a couple of projects in between, working on AI related things. Really started to understand the potential of deep learning when the first networks came out, especially working with the few co-founders who'd been working in San Francisco at the time on some of the very early deep learning use cases. It's really opened my eyes into the world of like how this has so much potential and it needs to be put into production.
Yeah. Okay. And then, do you want to give us an overview of Valohai and the problems that you're looking to solve?
Sure. So what we do is we help companies that build some of the most complicated machine learning products put those products into production. So most of the time that's deep learning, a lot of machine vision, a lot of LLMs, some audio, and even classical NLP. What we do is we take care of the orchestration, version control, and reproducibility of machine learning pipelines. So usually the big value proposition is that iteration speed goes through the roof. We allow teams to go from like running a few experiments per day to up to like thousands of experiments every day, while being able to keep track of that. So that then allows for you to go into scaling your team, scaling the amount of customers you're able to onboard on a daily basis, and so on. So
yeah, okay. And obviously MLOps as a field is kind of rapidly growing at the moment. Like, how do you see yourself positioned against some of the other players in the space? Like, how do you kind of differentiate yourself in the market?
Yeah, so yeah, there's so many corners of this market. I usually like to divide it up into first like classical machine learning and simple use cases. Things like where you're usually utilizing structured data, you're doing one-off things, and utilizing very simple models, maybe looking for an auto ML tool, not really looking to spend that much on the model, but rather on your data. We're not really in that area. Where we focus on is almost always deep learning, and they're like product-facing applications. So we don't really help with internal use cases. They're usually too simple to employ a large-scale MLOps solution like ours. So that would be then like I mentioned, like these like drug discovery tooling, diagnostics tools. We do a lot of Earth observation, so products that utilize satellite data for various different use cases.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you support a kind of collaboration in the kind of ML process? Because obviously data scientists and engineers have been in this area for a long time, but increasingly kind of non-technical business stakeholders are very involved in the process as well. Like, does Valohai kind of support that collaborative process?
Yeah, actually, that is a thing we've seen to change only relatively recently. So I'll answer this a bit more extensively. For the longest time, we didn't see a lot of business stakeholders or even product level stakeholders be involved in these ML teams that are building the products. It's a very like R&D heavy skunkworks project run by techies, and that was always pretty worrisome for us, because we've always had the thesis that if this is not connected to concrete business value, if these projects don't have business metrics involved, it is going to be very difficult to get buy-in inside organizations to push it, especially when we're talking enterprises. Startups, it's all the same,
Yeah.
right? But for enterprises, these R&D teams really struggle to explain historically how this technology can be transformational to the business. Mm-hmm. And I think that only recently, after ChatGPT, more and more business owners have had hands-on experience on how powerful machine learning can be. And now they're starting to connect the dots on like, oh, this is how this can be impactful for my business. So I think that this is a really new development that people are seeking for this shared collaboration between business, product owners, and the techies. But it's something that we've kind of been pushing towards right from the beginning. It's always been a part of our onboarding on like how do you quantify the progress to the business, not just like, hey, our accuracy improved by 0.5% last quarter. So what's the impact on the customer? What's the impact on business value? Like what is the game changer here? So that is one area where we always try and bring in value, and like how do we add that extra bit of story into the actual metrics that is also business driven, and help teams communicate to like tech teams communicate the business value that they're impacting, and also understanding, because a lot of the time they are very pent up in their tech metrics and don't really understand what is the link to the business. And the second thing is, now that costs are getting higher and higher, like models are getting bigger and bigger, data is getting bigger and bigger. One thing that a lot of teams are looking after is cost transparency. This used to be just huge sinkholes in the budget, like we're spending 2 million on compute and nobody really knows like on what project did the compute. So giving transparency so that that product owners, team managers can have the understanding on, is that investment we're doing bringing impact into the product, and like let's say there's one team that is spending a ton of money but there's no progress. How can we have that conversation on like, does this make sense for the business at all? That's one area. The third one where we see collaboration being a pain point, this kind of understanding the data access. So a lot of the teams that we work with have very strict data governance regulation. Mm-hmm. And they need to collaborate with a lot of internal teams that come with certain data regulation requirements, which then imposes a ton of restrictions on how they can work with their own infrastructure. So they're not, sometimes it can take several days to get even access rights to the data that you need. And this can be a huge internal struggle to figure out like how do we get data access, and then how do we track that and make sure that that we are compliant with the like IT side of business and their requirements. So by bringing in a kind of infrastructure as a service type of tool that automatically takes care of data management and data access and complies with IT regulation, it becomes so much easier for these teams to report to IT, and the overhead goes away.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned like the business value part of collaborating. Like whose responsibility is that to kind of find that kind of case? Like I guess it varies from company to company, but do you find it's kind of the tech guys, the R&D teams? Are you kind of giving them the metrics or helping them kind of identify, or is there somebody more on the business side whose job it is to kind of identify kind of what the value is in these programs?
Oh, like on average, there isn't any single standard in the market. Like it depends so much on the customer. Sometimes there is a more techie lead that understands the connection between business and tech. Sometimes it's somebody from business who's been told like, hey, we need to implement AI. It's very, very varied. I would say that these teams are new, and there is no standard structure that anybody is following.
Yeah, everyone's just kind of feeling it out as they go, which I suppose is the normal way with human beings and these things. So I mean, one of the kind of biggest challenges in the MLOps space generally is ensuring how the models perform consistently in production environments. How do you help users to kind of manage model deployment and monitoring to ensure kind of long-term stability and performance, I guess?
Yeah, good question. So we have always been use case agnostic. So we focus on teams that want to build their own models, and we provide the capability to build we bring in orchestration, version control, reproducibility, but it can be for images, it can be for radio images, for 3D, whatever. For that reason, monitoring has always been out of scope for us when we talk about like things like drift detection has been a big term in the last 4 years or so. What is drift detection? What is drift for time series of a vibration of an engine compared to satellite images of oceans? There's no overarching tool that can capture both of these. But what is the unifying factor is that whenever you detect something that is problematic, you need to automatically be able to go back and fix that problem. But it can be automatically rerunning the pipeline, or it can be somebody being able to understand what is the model that has a problem in production, how was it created, and how can I rerun that training job on a new set of data, or maybe there's some code changes that need to be fixed, and then how am I able to backtest that against the data that caused the problem, right? So that is something we can offer for everybody. That is the part that never changes. But then there's a lot of use case specific great monitoring tooling out there that we integrate with. But when that message comes, or that alert comes in that, hey, there's something wrong with your model, we always want to be able to tell you that this is the model, this is how it came to be, and this is how you can fix it.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously, MLOps just generally is getting a lot of traction across different industries at the moment. Like, where do you see the highest demand in terms of industries? Who's adopting these solutions at the fastest pace right now?
Yeah. So like life sciences, I feel like is one big area, and then outside of LLMs, life sciences is the big area. Then when it comes to LLMs, that's of course a completely different story. But there we see everything from productivity assistant tools, stuff like that. But I think that there's it's important to understand that there's a big difference between if you are fine-tuning or training your own model compared to just utilizing a third-party API. If you're at the level where you're just utilizing a third-party API and it's more of a side thing, and what you're offering is the capability to integrate that into a specific use case and offer maybe a simple RAG on top of that, we're not the tool for you. When you're at a stage where you need to take an open source model, maybe fine tune that for a specific use case, that's more of an interesting area for us, and that is moving much slower than these like easy to implement API based solutions.
And what are the kind of challenges for other sectors which are a bit behind life sciences and others? Like when you talk to companies, what are the struggles that you're seeing with them in terms of implementing these models effectively?
I would say that for me the biggest problem is organizational. So having somebody, especially if we talk large enterprises, right? Any larger company, finding somebody who can connect the dot between actual business problem and the capability to solve that with machine learning, and then on top of that being able to pitch that on a level to get a budget and then build a team, because these people are really hard to find, and start building. So I think that there's far more use cases out there than there are people to build, and even fewer people who are domain experts, and on top of that can understand how to apply machine learning into that domain.
So the biggest bottleneck still is kind of human skills and expertise, so lack of kind of ML engineers and data scientists in the world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. And obviously you've been going a few years like with Valohai now, so you kind of started, I mean, you may already be aware of kind of transformer models at that time, but obviously most of like the wider public wouldn't have been. Like you've presumably started focusing more on the kind of traditional ML side, and you've seen kind of LLMs become a bigger thing in recent years. Like how have you seen that kind of influence affecting like the ML ops industry, and what has that meant for Valohai if you had to kind of make any iterations and changes to your platform?
Yeah, so I think when you've been for a longer time in the industry, you get a more realistic grasp on the world. Like right now, everybody's just talking about LLMs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we see teams just barely starting to get to real value on machine vision projects that were started 5 years ago, right? So I think we are on the very top of the hype cycle of LLMs. I think there's gonna be a bit of a, what is it, the plateau of disillusionment coming up, where it's gonna slow down a bit, especially people start to realize the limitations of LLMs. And by the way, I'm in no way saying that LLMs are not influential. They will completely change the world. They will completely change almost everything we do on a daily basis. At the same time, they have a lot of limitations, and putting them into real world use cases is very difficult and takes a lot of time. And I think that we're gonna see that, and it's gonna be a few years when we really start to see this stuff go into production. And I've seen that same thing with, because like there was the first AI wave, I guess the first modern AI wave was now almost 10 years ago, and that stuff is only now starting to be really implemented and start to see like large scale revenues that are actionable and really impacting the world. And I think it's gonna be a bit of a time before LLMs get to that same point. Of course, we have this like these really quickly growing early things that have already seen tremendous traction, and will definitely see that in the future too.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of kind of the ML ops industry, like how do you see that kind of evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? You know, what's the kind of future for you, but then the industry as a whole as well?
So I think most teams that we see are still working on a pretty rudimentary process. If we compare to how software is being done today, there you wouldn't find a software team that doesn't have CI/CD in place, or like even ignoring unit tests is very, very, very rare. I think that we're not even close in machine learning. Most of these teams don't come from a very rigorous software development background, meaning they come from academia. All they ever had to do was do like a single one-off thing that became a research paper instead of a product that was maintained and grew to tremendous traction, and you need to grow the team from a single person to 100 overnight, and so on and so on. None of these checks and balances are in place in almost any company that we come across, nor does it yet bring a ton of value for a lot of teams. A lot of teams are still quite disconnected from that large-scale traction where scalable processes have an impact. So I think that more teams are gonna hit a point where they're not gonna be able to onboard as many customers as sales is bringing in. They're not going to be able to do as many use cases as the business wants, and that it's gonna be a limiter of growth, and that's finally gonna push the vast majority of teams towards implementing a more rigorous development process.
Yeah, okay. So if we kind of finish off talking about the process of building a company and kind of startups more generally. So you and I were talking before we started about how the vast majority of tech companies building an AI are based in the US. What do you think the main advantages of being or of building a company in AI in Europe have been?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So I didn't phrase that very well. So what do you think like the main advantage of being based in Europe is compared to kind of US? Because I think everybody just thinks it's better to be in the US than Europe, but I just wonder if there are any kind of pros to being based in Europe.
There are definitely some pros. I think cost structure for sure is a pro. I also think that competition on talent in Europe, especially like tech talent, is not regarded as highly as it is in US. But I think that there is very little difference, or you can even find better people in places like Finland who've been tried and tested globally, who maybe even worked in the Bay Area in top companies and then came back to Europe to start families and so on. And the cost is a fraction of what it would be in the Bay Area. Also, mostly because the living costs here are much smaller than they would be in the Bay Area. So that is definitely a plus.
And have you found any kind of difference in competition? Because obviously every AI company that starts in America, there tends to be kind of 5 competitors within a few weeks. I wonder whether some of them, haven't got to Europe yet, whether you found that you can kind of dominate the European market, a little bit better.
I think it would be more true for something other than developer tooling. I think developer tooling is a very global market where everybody just searches on Google for the best tooling. So it's very global competition. So I don't think it's something where people buy local. It's just they buy the best. So I don't think we have that benefit. But there's definitely industries where maybe you're selling, I don't know, to construction companies where the buyer is not a software developer. Definitely that it would be a different story. But for us, it's a global competition. It's free for all.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And what do you see as being the biggest disadvantages of building in Europe compared to US? I mean, we talked about access to kind of capital earlier on. Do you see any other disadvantages?
I mean, access to capital, but also the knowledge that comes with that capital. Like if you go with the European VC, it's pretty clear that fewer of those European VCs have seen a playbook that was successful in building a grand unicorn story, right? Like just factually, there's fewer in Europe than there are of them in US. So they will have better knowledge on how to build a company like that. Because if you think about the cost versus amount of capital available, yeah, we're behind, but I'm not sure that we're that much behind. But of course, like when you get somebody like, let's say Sequoia, who has, I don't know how many unicorns now in their portfolio, they will have people seen it and have done it. It's a completely different story when you're going with somebody who has maybe their first fund and have maybe in their previous life seen 1 or 2 unicorns. They can be very helpful, but it's not obviously the same. And then there's this access to things like marketing. When certain top tier US VCs put money into a company, especially in tech, it's almost newsworthy on its own.
Yeah.
The same doesn't apply to a lot of the European VCs yet, at least.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously one of the biggest challenges for any startup is kind of finding that product market fit. If you think back to the kind of start of Valohai, you kind of had this great idea. Like, how did you go through that process of kind of validating the fact that you were actually solving the real problem that the customers had there?
I don't think there's any other way than to pick up the phone or go to events, talk to as many potential customers as possible. And if nobody's buying, there's something wrong with the product, or I mean, you're not product market fit. Could be anywhere along the line. You might not be communicating the value right. You might be, but yeah. What we did was we went to US, we went to San Francisco, and tried to talk to everybody who was on the top of the like pushing the envelope in the industry and seeing what their pain points are, and are we actually embracing those pain points? Are we helping companies that face these issues today?
Yeah. Okay. And obviously you've grown a company, in an industry which is kind of skyrocketing. I mean, what are the kind of perhaps unexpected challenges that you faced along the way, and how did you go about kind of addressing those?
Unexpected challenges. I think how difficult scaling sales is, I think, has been a surprise to me, especially when you're doing it on a global level and you're building something that can be repeatable and scalable. That is something I had no experience in before. I have done sales for 15 years, 20 years close to, but never in a way before where you were able to reliably hire a person and forecast that with more than 50% likelihood this person will meet their quota after 4 months. And how do you build a process that can achieve that? Has been very difficult, but also very rewarding.
Sort of, yeah, figuring out the kind of kinks in that process. Okay, understand. And looking, towards the future for Valohai, like what is getting you up in the morning at the moment? Like, what are you really excited about? I mean, you don't need to kind of reveal any secrets or anything like that, but just, what are you kind of really hyped about at the moment?
Well, for me, it's always been the customers and the use cases. We have the luxury of working in an industry where our customers have truly an impact on a global scale. And then like going into a lot of sales calls, I do still go to a lot of sales meetings because I like to keep up with the industry. I like to meet new potential customers and understand where they are and how little process there is still in place on average. And I know that it's limiting this amazing technology from impacting people's lives, and we do have a solution for that. I think that drives me, and that's what's been driving me from day one.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, I appreciate you coming on today, Eero. If people want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach you?
Email, first name @valohai.com.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you to everybody out there watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of AI People coming soon.
Thanks, Ben.